I am Akshara Kumar from M5 at Stonehill, and my topic for my personal project is to learn the Korean language and see how the culture is related to the language. What is culture? Culture is defined as the ideas, customs, or social behavior of particular people or society. It plays a key role in the way meanings are interpreted. Not knowing the culture, it is easy for the language to be misinterpreted. What is language? Language is defined as the method of human communication, either spoken or written, consisting of the use of words in a structured and conventional way. The practices of the country affect the way we interpret and make out meanings of the country's language. The way language is taught is reflected on the way we understand the language. An example would be if you learn mainly by listening to the language, then you would be strong in listening and speaking rather than reading and writing. It isn't fair to exclude symbols and gestures while defining language, because that is an aspect that joins the community with their language. What is the relation between language and culture? This is one question that came to my head while I was learning the Korean language. Learning the culture made me soon realize why certain aspects of the language were the way they were. It was influenced through culture. Learning the culture helps you understand the language with a different perspective, similar to that of the natives. Having a strong base when it comes to learning a new language is extremely important. Only here, knowing alphabets as a base is as important as knowing the country's culture, to be able to truly understand the meaning and convey our feelings with references to history as well. Cultural differences can cause language differences. One example of that would be geography. In China, the east wind symbolizes warmness, spring, and beautiful things. But in England, it is the opposite. It's the west wind that symbolizes beautiful things and warmness. As a result of this, a Chinese poem caused a massive confusion between both communities. The poem reads, "Hard it was to see, harder still to part. The east wind has no force, the 100 flowers wither. It's difficult for to meet and to part. The east wind too weak to revive, flowers dead. It's a warm wind, the west wind, full of birds' cries. I never hear the west wind, but tears are in my eyes, for it comes from the west, I ans, the old brown hill, and April's is in the west wind and daffodils." In England, east winds mean cold and bitterness, and hence the meaning of the poem was misinterpreted because of the cultural difference. These are the few general examples of the effect a certain language can have on us. Language influences what you remember, but the structure of the language plays a role when it comes to learning new things. Depending on how many syllables the number words have, can make it either easier or harder for us to remember phone numbers or to do mental calculations. Language can affect how quickly we find out whether we're male or female. This depends on whether the words like you have a gender marking. In Hebrew, the word you has a gender, whereas in Finnish it doesn't. Therefore, a Hebrew kid will figure out their gender before a Finnish kid. Our thinking process can also be affected by the script of the language. Written from left to right, these people would tend to arrange their cards from left to right, whereas it would be the opposite if your script was from right to left. These are few main aspects of Korean culture. Respect and education is highly valued. Social standing of the family is also quite important. This is the reason marriages used to be arranged to either the same or higher class. Common practices of traditional medicine include herbal medicine, acupuncture, acupressure. Few well-regarded virtues are patience, perseverance, sacrifice, self-restraint, modesty, and humility. The Korean language is approximately spoken by 70 million people. There are 6 different dialects which belong to different regions, including Central, Northwest, Northeast, Southwest, Southeast, and Daegu dialect. The syntax of the language is subject first, followed by the object, then at the end is the verb. Honorifics is an important part of the language. It is a type of speech with certain verb or noun endings used to demonstrate respect and politeness. These are some basic examples of how Korean culture is related to the language. Respect and politeness are important values. Therefore, yo or imnida is added at the end of the sentence to convey these values. Humility and modesty are other virtues that the culture teaches them. This is shown in the language because the word yes would actually mean no. This is a form of indirect communication. To be able to attain optimum and first-hand information and evidence, I wrote questions for a few native speakers of Korean to gain knowledge through their answers and also arrive at conclusions of how Korean language and culture are related. How do you think a person who is brought up learning Korean his whole life would be shaped differently to a person brought up with English? For example, in Korean you would have to add yo after each sentence to make them polite and respectful. What are a few other examples of this? In Korea, being polite and respectful is fundamental. We are brought up learning how to speak and behave respectfully in front of others, especially the elders. For example, we have to speak in the respectful form and bow our heads to greet an elderly person. Younger person should not interrupt or talk back to an elder person. Usually you have to take your shoes off to enter someone else's house. These are things that are obvious and expected of every Korean, and people tend to criticize your parents if you don't meet these expectations. Different cultural values affect both the language and the attitude of the people. Eastern culture is vastly different from the Western in many ways, especially when it comes to addressing elders. The Korean language is very complicated. It carries values of the past as well as changing morals of the present. It is critical to understand the history and various connotations of the language in order to become fluent in Korean. And this shapes Koreans' views and opinions of the world. The ways of communication often affect the mindset of the speaker. Question 2. Are there different levels of politeness, and are they somehow structured to reflect the social hierarchy? There are different levels of speaking forms. If you're asking an elderly person, such as your grandparents, if they've had a meal, you'd say "친친 잡으셨어요?" Whereas you'd say "밥 먹었어요" to someone who's older but still closer to your age. I think this does reflect the social hierarchy, not necessarily in terms of economic welfare, but more in terms of age. There is a higher language that is used in certain situations. In addressing elders or people of power, we are more inclined and expected to use respectful tone of Korean, such as adding yo or imnida at the end of the sentence. Question 3. Oppa is a word which is translated to older brother, but is also used to address your boyfriend. Is this perhaps related to culture, maybe because boyfriends tend to be older than the girlfriend, or is there another reason for this? When someone calls their boyfriend oppa, it's probably because he's actually older. Girls usually refer to any older brother as oppa, so I would call an older brother oppa even if we're not blood related. Girls usually do not call their boyfriends oppa if they're younger. Similarly, younger girls would call older girls as 언니, and younger boys would call older boys as 형, and older girls as 누나. Question 4. Adding ung after a sentence is a sign. This is supposed to change the tone for you to sound cuter. Can you provide me with some other examples of this changing of tone or speech in Korean, not only to add the cute aspect of it, but for any other aspect, and why you think that is? There has been a lot of short forms in our language recently. It's kind of like ASAP or RSVP. We take the first letter of each word instead of saying the whole sentence. Also, if you look at conversations or comments online, you'd see that people use a lot of k or h, which are just alphabets to show that we're laughing, like LOL. I think this is mainly due to the widespread use of social media. Question 5. How does the history of Korea account to the culture it has flourished to? And how does this affect the language? How is the language different from then, the dynasties, to now? It is similar to that of English during Shakespeare's time, being different from English used today. I think the language evolved as we started to encounter different cultures. Example, there are a lot of words that are combinations of English and Korean or Japanese and Korean. And in order to know the exact meaning of the words, you need to know Chinese. Whether through colonizations or our own will, I know that when we were under the Japanese rule, they changed the whole education system so that the Koreans were taught in Japanese instead of Korean. Introduction to social media has definitely played a big role, and the shift from dynasty rule to democratic rule probably influenced the day-to-day language as well. Question 6. Can you give me a few examples of Korean slang and what they mean? It would be great if you could provide with that the reason through culture as to why these slangs came to be. Noche means something that is not funny. Shimkung is a heartthrob or a huge crush. Taebak means awesome. Her is like, oh my god. Chunta is very cool. Some is something going on between two people, and Chang is great or amazing. A lot of them are words combined with English words which are pretty new, which show how we've adapted to American culture. Some are just short descriptive words that describe how one should respond to certain situations or things. It is important that you'd say these words in a certain tone to convey the feelings appropriately. Question 7. What are few differences between different dialects in Korean, Saturi? Are you perceived differently for certain things than others? Are prejudices formed because of these differences? What role do you think culture has on these dialects? In the past, yes, people looked down on those who spoke in Saturi, but today not really. In fact, people now try to speak in certain Saturi because they think it sounds cool. Question 8. Can you provide me with some examples of idioms and how they relate to the historic culture of Korea? The meaning must have derived from somewhere, and like most idioms, it must have been an incident from some olden time. Number 1. If outgoing words are beautiful, then incoming words will be beautiful too. This encourages people to speak nicely to others. Number 2. Blood is thicker than water. This means that everything comes second to family. Rice cake on a painting refers to something you want to have but can't afford it. I think this probably came from poor, ordinary people being jealous of those who were wealthy having good food. Dragon was born in the stream refers to someone from small town with ordinary background who has had great success. Shows how people in poorer backgrounds economically or from rural areas were looked down on previously, but also shows that society appreciates your effort and hard work. Question 10. Studying a culture with its language really broadens the horizon. What cultural aspect do you think can be learned by learning the Korean language? Respect and politeness are definitely values that you learn through learning Korean. I guess you'd also learn how much influence the media has had on our daily small talks, including K-pop, K-drama, variety shows, etc. And it might sound a bit odd, but you'd learn how important food is in Korean culture. Good food equals good conversation. When culture changes, also referred to as when it gets westernized, then this has a direct effect on language too. An example being slang words are formed. History also has a big role to play. Under colonization, a lot of changes take place. Culture and language are a part of that change. The beginning and the end to the word of a language are changed, or an element is added to symbolize characteristics of the culture, for example, respect. The culture of social media, or referred to as SNS in Korea, have had a major effect on the day-to-day language. For example, short forms have been formed, such as ASAP or LOL. Pop culture has evolved a lot and has helped to form new ideas and ideals, majorly destroying culture at its root core. 저는 한국어를 배우고 있습니다. 이것은 제 개인 프로젝트와 생성물의 주요 부분입니다. 인증서를 얻는 것이 저의 주요 표정 하나이었습니다. 저는 온라인 수업인 코리안 클래스 101을 통해 한국어를 배웠습니다. 당연히 완벽하게는 언어를 배울 수는 없었지만 저는 온라인 시험을 치른 후 A1과 A2 인증서를 받았습니다. 저는 친구를 통해서 한국어에 관심을 얻었고 기다리 축소는 K-드라마를 보고 K-팝도 듣기 시작했습니다.